was a sweltering afternoon on the dusty docks of Port Tortuga, the kind of day where the ocean breeze gave up trying to cool folks off, and the gulls had little interest in scrounging for scraps. Squatting atop an abandoned crate was a garishly feathered parrot who went by the name of Squawk. Most parrots enjoyed repeating whatever they'd heard the day before, but Squawk was different. He had learned to speak in full sentences, many of them peppered with outrageous pirate lingo, and had a flair for haggling that would put any salty sea captain to shame. Wherever Squawk went, trouble followed. It wasn't because he was inherently evil, he was just blessed and cursed, with boundless curiosity, a love of shiny objects, and an even greater love for crunchy crackers. He had discovered that if he squawked cleverly and flashed a bit of parchment in front of the right or wrong person, he could land himself a stash of snacks that would keep him fed for days. And that was precisely what started the mania among Port Tortuga's many buccaneers. Treasure maps in exchange for crackers. The first fiasco began at an old tavern near the waterfront, the Rusty Mermaid. A quiet evening was already out of the question. The pub was filled with rough-and-tumble scallywags complaining about the shortage of good loot in the region. At one table sat Captain Rumbeard, an infamous privateer with an unquenchable thirst for gold and an equally unquenchable thirst for rum. He was nursing his latest disappointment, gazing into the sticky rim of his tankard, when a ruffle of feathers landed on the back of his chair. "Pieces of eight? Pieces of eight?" Squawk teased, pecking at the captain's hat. Captain Rumbeard fumed, about to swat the bird away, when Squawk hopped onto the table and slid a scrap of parchment beneath Rumbeard's nose. It was a corner of a treasure map, rumpled, partially smudged, showing the faint outline of an island dotted by an ominous X near the center. Squawk puffed out his chest. "Treasure map for a cracker? Deal or no deal?" Rumbeard's wide eyes jumped from the parrot to the parchment. "Treasure, you say? Treasure? Shiny gold, rubies, pearls?" Squawk cackled. "Fork over them crackers." He flapped his wings, clearly impatient. Rumbeard was so mesmerized, he didn't stop to wonder how a parrot had gotten hold of a map. He reached into the large leather coin pouch at his side, which held far more than coins, fished out a few salted crackers, and placed them gently on the table. "That's it, Squawk Squawk. Need more. Crackers. More." "Ye feathery dog," muttered Rumbeard. "Fine, have them all." He poured half a sleeve of stale crackers onto the table. "Now hand over that map, or so help me, I'll wring your scrawny neck." Squawk happily pushed the crumpled parchment over, snatched up the crackers in his talons, and proceeded to nibble with unrestrained satisfaction. Within moments, he fluttered off toward the rafters, leaving a stunned Rumbeard cradling the scrap of map like it was made of solid gold. The old captain's mind was already spinning with visions of chests brimming with loot. That same night, Squawk ventured into the kitchen of the Rusty Mermaid. He found Cookie Carl just finishing the day's cleanup. Carl was known for his luscious ginger beard and no-nonsense approach to feeding rowdy pirates. More importantly, he guarded crates upon crates of provisions. Squawk's bright eyes zeroed in on a particularly enticing wooden trunk, half open, with rows of crisp, glistening saltine crackers. "Cook!" Squawk sang, perching on a shelf above Carl's head. Startled, Carl spun around with a fish fillet knife in hand. "Blimey, you again! Get out of my kitchen, ye menace!" Squawk chirped, then slowly produced a different scrap of map from somewhere under his wing. This one showed a snippet of coastline with scribbled measurements and cryptic sketches. Carl pretended to show no interest, but his eyes darted to the parchment. "I ain't got any time for your nonsense. I be fixin' to close up." "You want treasure? I want crackers," Squawk declared with a dramatic flap. "Fair trade, yes," Carl snorted. "Nothing's fair with you, you trickster." "Treasure map for a cracker. Treasure map for a cracker," the parrot repeated, bobbing his head, letting the parchment catch the flickering lantern light. Despite himself, Carl found his curiosity piqued. The map's coastline looked vaguely familiar, perhaps near the reefs off Boar's Tusk Key. If there was gold to be found, it might buy him out of this grubby kitchen forever. And all it would cost him was a handful of crackers? He slid open the wooden trunk and handed Squawk a small stack. The parrot swooped down, snatched them, and deposited the battered parchment into Carl's large spatula, as if the exchange were a meticulously choreographed dance. Then, with a triumphant squawk and a shower of cracker crumbs, he was off again, leaving Carl to dream of hidden booty. Before long, Captain Rumbeard was bragging about his new map in the tavern, brandishing it like a war trophy. Word spread that a curious parrot was making deals with gullible and unstoppable pirates. The mania that followed turned Port Tortuga into the biggest fiasco it had seen in a decade. It wasn't just Captain Rumbeard or Cookie Carl. Over the next few days, rumors abounded that the Parrot was visiting captains, cabin boys, and even local farmers, exchanging different scraps of treasure maps for increasingly large sums of crackers. Benny the barnacle farmer swore he'd seen Squawk at sunrise in his hen house, coaxing him to part with an entire burlap sack of feed in exchange for a chart to the Golden Egg, which Benny believed to be hidden beneath volcanic rock somewhere offshore. Pegleg Pete insisted that Squawk gave him instructions on how to find the Pearl of the Cyclone, an opalescent gem rumored to bestow eternal youth, although the map he presented was suspiciously done in thick crayons on cheap paper. Meanwhile, a seldom heard of pirate named Patchy Bill claimed to have acquired the true map to the legendary Jade Galleon wreck. When pressed for details, Patchy Bill admitted in hushed tones that all it took was a crate of fancy herbed crackers, rosemary and garlic to be exact, and poof, the trove was his for the plundering. Naturally, these revelations led to a wave of enthusiastic chaos. In the bars, pirates argued over whose map was real. On the streets, fights broke out because no one wanted to share their new route to glory. Ship captains found their vessels hijacked in the middle of the night by their own crew, who wanted exclusive rights to follow their brand new, deadly accurate directions. In short order, half of Port Tortuga's ships weighed anchor in a frantic race, each captain secretly believing they alone possessed the Parrot's genuine map. In truth, only one person in Port Tortuga had a clear enough mind to question the entire fiasco, a stern, shrewd old pirate matriarch known as One-Eyed Ethel. She kept to her modest sloop and often cackled at the gullibility of others. Sipping from a chipped mug of green tea, Ethel watched from her vantage point on the harbor's outskirts. Prone to suspicion, she found it intriguing that everyone was suddenly in possession of a genuine scrap from the same deserted island or the same rumored coral reef. She had a hunch that this mania was more about wild rumor than reliable fact. After all, how many original treasure maps could exist in one port without it being a scam? Reminded of her earlier days before she'd lost an eye to an unfortunate incident involving a marlin spike and an overzealous deckhand, Ethel recalled witnessing a similar mania with a stolen cargo of silver goblets that turned out to be tin trophies from a children's sporting event. However, the Parrot angle was new. They say curiosity killed the cat, but Ethel had a different motto. Curiosity made the pirate. She decided to track Squawk herself, see if she could discover what the feathery con artist was really up to, apart from amassing crackers, of course. When dusk fell, Ethel quietly made her way through Port Tortuga's labyrinthine back alleys. The cries of drunken sailors echoed from the taverns. In the distance, cannon fire from a scuffle at sea rumbled like a distant storm. Ethel followed the subtle clues like the crackers that had mysteriously dropped into the gutter, or the occasional "pieces of 8" echoing from a passing rooftop. Sure enough, perched on a broken crate near a dingy boarded-up shop was Squawk, nibbling on a wedge of cracker bigger than his own beak. Ethel approached calmly, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Hello, bird. Fancy a conversation?" Squawk glared suspiciously, ruffled his feathers, but didn't flee. He was too intent on finishing his snack. "Got crackers?" Ethel grinned. "Sure, I've got crackers. Good ones, too. But first, I got questions." Squawk paused at that. He was used to the typical exchange, a piece of map for crackers, no questions asked. But Ethel seemed to have an agenda. After a thoughtful tilt of his head, he mumbled, "Squawk listening. I know you've been handing out map scraps to half the pirates in this town. I want to know if any of them are real." Squawk's eyes glistened mischievously. "All real, all worthless." Ethel blew the steam off her cup of tea. "If they're all real, how can they be worthless?" Treasure was found long ago, Squawk replied with a shrug. Humans too slow, some is fakes, some is old, some is double copied from same map. Ha! They not know difference. Squawk trades for crackers, crackers, crackers. This admission made Ethel bark out a laugh so loud that a couple of stray dogs down the alley perked up. What a cunning scheme, she said. You're feeding off their greed. Squawk was too busy rummaging for more crumbs to notice her pleased grin. Crackers are good. Money's no good to Bird. Humans are silly. Clever Bird, Ethel remarked, now entirely delighted by the parrot's unapologetic honesty. Tell me, though, is there a map you haven't shared yet? A real one, perhaps? Squawk paused mid-peck and looked Ethel dead in her single good eye. Why you want— If there's a real fortune out there, I might like to claim it. I'm not opposed to paying a few crackers for good information, but I want the genuine article. This piqued Squawk's interest. He produced a final chunk of parchment from beneath his wing, this one noticeably in better condition than the others. It showcased a meticulously drawn route, complete with latitude and longitude lines, some cryptic symbols, and a bold X near the coastline of an island shaped like a skull. Ethel instantly recognized the shape, the dreaded Skull Isle, said to be cursed but also rumored to guard the hidden wealth of Blacktooth Barbarossa, a terrifying pirate long gone. She leaned forward and carefully studied it in the weak light. You haven't sold this one yet. Humans not give me enough crackers, Squawk huffed. Want big crackers, maybe chocolate crackers? Or what's that fancy stuff, the round crackers with cheese, maybe? Despite her cynicism, Ethel couldn't help but chuckle. Fancy cheese crackers, you say? Seems like a fair trade for the chance to discover Barbarossa's hoard. She rummaged in her rucksack slung over her shoulder and pulled out half a box of artisan crackers that looked suspiciously expensive. Each had flecks of rosemary and sea salt. How about these posh ones? Squawk's eyes bulged with delight. Deal! He hopped forward, snatching the entire half box with glee. With a deft movement of his beak, he shoved the pristine map into Ethel's outstretched palm. Pleasure doing business with you, Ethel said, tucking the parchment carefully into her coat. If you need me, well, actually, don't need me. Try not to cause too much more chaos, you hear? Squawk was already lost in the bliss of munching on the gourmet crackers. Squawk, no promises, he said between bites, crumbs cascading off his feathery chest. Armed with the new revelation, Ethel set about recruiting a small crew, trusted souls who valued cunning and loyalty over blind greed. She had learned her lesson about overhyped nonsense. A team of 5, including her longtime confidant, Tartan Toby, and 2 unwavering deckhands known as Bick and Buck, gathered in Ethel's cabin to study the newly acquired map. Without tipsy eyes and with a bit of navigational sense, they noted that the route was indeed feasible, and the symbols lined up with old maritime lore about Barbarossa's hidden citadel. Early the next morning, Ethel's sloop, the Sea Hound, slipped out of Port Tortuga under the cover of half-light. The rest of the port was still asleep or groggily cursing hangovers. As Sea Hound's sails filled with the faint breeze, Ethel and her men hoped to reach Skull Isle before word got out that the real map was with them. The parrot mania had triggered a feverish quest for imaginary prizes, so there was a good chance their journey would remain unnoticed. Unfortunately, secrecy only lasts so long in a place teeming with pirates. Just before midday, as the sun bobbed overhead, Ethel's lookout spotted 2 ships trailing them. Through the spyglass, Tartan Toby identified the tattered black flag of Captain Rumbeard and the battered sloop of Pegleg Pete. Both seemed to be in hot pursuit, sails taut and cannons at the ready. Ethel cursed under her breath. Likely, word had leaked about a parrot trading away a single, authentic map. The chase was on. Ethel's crew trimmed sails to get every ounce of speed from the Sea Hound, but Runebeard's crew had a swift brigantine, the Jolly Dagger, known for speed. Pegleg Pete's smaller craft, the Limping Whale, kept pace behind, presumably waiting to pick off whichever broadside gave them the advantage. By the time Ethel's crew neared Skull Isle's jagged silhouette on the horizon, the pursuing ships had closed the gap considerably. "Man the cannons," Ethel barked, her voice calm but fiery. "We'll not be giving up this map lightly." A short volley of cannon fire thundered across the waves, and smoke billowed as the brigantine attempted to intimidate them. Ethel and her crew returned fire with measured precision. Tartan Toby's shot blasted a hole near the Jolly Dagger's stern, causing the pursuing brigantine to slow. But Pegleg Pete, taking advantage of the confusion, steered around the exchange, closing in on the Seahound's starboard side. Next thing they knew, ropes with grappling hooks latched onto Ethel's deck and pirates started boarding with an uproar. Amid the clang of cutlasses, the shouts and scuffles of men thrown onto wooden planks, Ethel whipped out her pistol. She fired a shot into the air, momentarily halting both crews. "Come any closer," she snarled at Pegleg Pete, "and you'll get none of the treasure. Let's not forget I hold the map, lads." Pegleg Pete was a wiry man with a scraggly beard and a left leg replaced by a well-worn wooden peg. He glowered at Ethel. "Hand it over, or we'll scuttle your sloop to the depths." Suddenly a massive shadow darted overhead. All eyes turned skyward. Perhaps in the mania and chaos, none had noticed the bright swirl of feathers swooping in, but there he was, Squawk, sporting a biscuit crumb mustache. He circled the deck, cawing, "Pieces of 8? Pieces of 8? Everyone want map? Squawk want crackers!" This unexpected arrival captivated both pirates and deckhands alike. With everyone distracted, Tartan Toby and Bick seized the moment. They shoved Pegleg Pete's men back toward the rails, swords clanging, and the next instant, Ethel took advantage of the confusion to steer the Seahound around a jutting reef at the edge of Skull Isle. Pegleg Pete's crew scrambled to keep their footing, hooking ropes and stumbling across the deck as the ship separated again. Cannon fire erupted from Rumbeard's brigantine, but it fell short, splashing harmlessly behind the Seahound. While the two rival captains jockeyed for position, Ethel's sloop deftly slipped into a hidden cove. Though battered, the Seahound was still afloat. Ethel's men quickly found a narrow beach flanked by rocky cliffs, moored the sloop, and readied themselves to go ashore. Their hearts pounded with excitement and nerves. Was the treasure truly out there, waiting, or was this just another elaborate dupe of the cunning Parrot? As if reading their thoughts, Squawk appeared, showing off a satisfied glint in his eyes. He perched on the prow, rummaging for leftover crackers that might be stashed on board. Ethel pointed a finger at him. "You better not be wasting our time, bird. We gave you real fancy crackers for this clue." Squawk ruffled his feathers. "Map is real, Barbarossa's stash is there. Use your eyes." Squawk no liar on fancy crackers. Ethel hopped onto the sand, leading her entourage toward what looked like an overgrown path. Enormous palm trees and vine-draped boulders creaked and groaned in the ocean breeze. After a quarter-hour of trudging, they found the first landmark from the map, a toppled statue of a horned creature half devoured by the jungle. Following the route carefully, they climbed over a rocky ridge that coursed into a narrow valley. Sure enough, on the other side lay a ragged fortress carved into the face of the cliff. Closer inspection revealed it had likely been concealed for decades behind wild vines and moss. Inside, the air was thick and stale, laced with the hint of old wood and rotting seaweed. With swords drawn and lanterns lit, the pirates probed the darkness. The fortress corridor led to a grand chamber lined with rotted crates and broken barrels. At the far end, an iron-bound chest loomed behind what appeared to be the bleached skeleton of some large beast, possibly a sea serpent. The group's heartbeats quickened. Tartan Toby leaned in to examine the chest lock, a rusted contraption shaped, like of all things, a parrot's beak. "Fitting," he drawled. "Anybody have a key?" Ethel shook her head. "We'll have to—" Her sentence was cut short by the echoes of distant shouting. They all froze. Through the thick fortress walls, they heard the faint but unmistakable sound of Captain Rumbeard's gruff bellow and Pegleg Pete's nasal bark. Their pursuers had found the cove as well. "We don't have time for a delicate approach," hissed Ethel. "Stand back." She summoned Buck, a burly, stoic deckhand who had a hammer the size of a small cannon. With one mighty blow, he smashed the lock clean off. The chest's lid creaked as Ethel and Toby pried it open. Instantly, a glittering gleam erupted from within. Golden coins, ornate goblets, strings of pearls, and glimmering gems, Every one of them recognized it Barbarossa's hoard, real and undeniably splendid. Their moment of triumph was cut short by the clatter of footsteps behind them. Rumbeard and Pete's men flooded into the chamber, sabers raised, sporting fresh bruises from the scuffle at sea. They looked from the open chest to Ethel's small band, then locked eyes on the loot. For a heartbeat, the pirates simply gawped, mesmerized by the shining trove. "Take it!" Rumbeard roared, rushing forward. Pandemonium erupted as cutlasses clashed, boots skidded on the dusty floor, and men grappled for the spoils. Ethel's crew fought valiantly to defend their claim. In the midst of chaos, Squawk soared overhead, shrieking with excitement. Treasure, trackers for treasure. Amid the fray, Tartan Toby caught sight of a side passage just wide enough for a single file escape. He bellowed at Ethel, "We got to move, Captain! Grab whatever you can!" Ethel, Bick, and Buck stuffed their pockets and sacks with coins and jewels, while Toby brandished his sword, fending off Pegleg Pete's buckler swipe. The two deckhands used the chest lid itself as a makeshift shield, shoving away a snarling group of assailants. With every second, more pirates flooded in, drawn like moths to a flame. The fortress turned into a swirling melee. Finally, Ethel yelled, "Retreat!" She and her crew plunged into the side corridor, which Squawk Hot of them seemed to know by heart. The Parrot led them with excited caws through a twisting series of dark passageways, stumbling upon a small ladder that climbed into an opening in the fortress roof. The rickety structure led them to a hidden lookout, and from there, they clambered onto an overgrown ledge that doubled back to the hidden cove. Back on the beach, Seahound was still bobbing in the shallows. Behind them, the sounds of fighting echoed out of the fortress. Ethel grinned grimly, acknowledging the pandemonium they left behind. She and her crew dashed toward the boat, pearls slipping from tattered bags, gold coins jingling in every pocket. By some miracle, none of Rumbeard's or Pete's men had remained behind to guard the Seahound, too enticed by the treasure deeper within the fortress. Once aboard, the crew hoisted anchor as quickly as their trembling arms allowed. With the wind in their favor, they set sail just as the first of their baffled pursuers stumbled onto the shore, yelling curses that the tide washed away. Ethel's heart raced, but she couldn't help feeling a surge of triumph and relief. A portion of Barbarossa's treasure belonged to the Seahound crew now. After a few hours at sea, with Skull Isle fading into the horizon, they finally caught a moment's peace. They spilled their bounty onto the deck to admire their new wealth. Tartan Toby whistled low at the glint of rubies against the setting sun. Bick and Buck were nearly drooling. Ethel chuckled at their awe. Then came a jubilant voice overhead. "Crackers! Crackers!" Squawk fluttered down onto the helm, feathers ruffled. "Bird did good. Bird want reward." Ethel laughed. "You sure did lead us straight to the mother lode. Where'd you learn that route?" "Barbarossa's first mate had pet parrot," Squawk replied primly. "Told the story to me granddad, told all. They never found the island. But Squawk found it. Clever bird, yes?" With a sigh of fond exasperation, Ethel rummaged for leftover rations. Fortunately, Toby had a small cache of the fancy cheese crackers stashed away. Ethel held up a chunk of cheddar-topped biscuit. Squawk snatched it happily, letting out a contented coo. There was indeed no better payment for a cunning parrot. Across the deck, Bick and Buck started dividing the treasure. Nearby, Toby carefully appraised the more unusual pieces. Ethel found herself gazing out to sea, pondering the mania her feathery friend had unleashed in Port Tortuga. The parrot's penchant for trading worthless or outdated maps for crackers had triggered a city-wide scramble. Only by refusing to be hoodwinked did Ethel stumble on the real prize. She turned to Squawk, who was now parading around with a string of small pearls draped across his neck like a miniature necklace. "Why not trot back to Tortuga and keep running your scheme?" she teased. "Might get yourself a lifetime supply of crackers." Squawk cocked his head. "Might do that," he replied. "But first, want more chitter crackers, then see what silly human's up to next." "Just promise you won't trade anything that'll bring them chasing after us again," Ethel said with exaggerated sternness. "Bird, no promise," Squawk echoed cheekily, swallowing another crumb. He fluttered up to Ethel's shoulder, nibbling contentedly on the last bits of cheese. But maybe Bird help Ethel again, he added in a more serious tone. When time is right. Ethel smirked. I'd like that. If there's more treasure to be found out there, you'd be a fine partner, as long as you don't sell me out for a box of crackers. Itchy Squawk laughed, an odd, squawking cackle that echoed across the deck. A whole box? That's a lot of crackers. The sun slowly dipped beyond the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red. The Sea Hound sailed on, laden with enough gold and jewels to keep her crew in comfort and adventuring gear for years. Port Tortuga would be left with rumors and second-hand stories of how one-eyed Ethel and a con artist, Parrot, pulled off the greatest treasure score in recent memory. The mania would subside, as manias do, but the legend of a flamboyant parrot trading maps for crackers would become one for the tavern halls. Drunken buccaneers would forever recount the day their quest for rumored fortune was overshadowed by the real deal and the bird who orchestrated it all. In the weeks to come, pirates from near and far would return to Port Tortuga in shambles, cursing worthless scraps of parchment. Cookie Carl discovered the reefs indicated on his purchased map were home not to pearls, but to stinging jellyfish. Captain Rumbeard ran aground on an uncharted sandbar, leading him to swear revenge upon all avian creatures. Pegleg Pete's entire crew was nearly devoured by a pack of monstrous beasts, actually quite large iguanas, on some deserted island. They all had their parrot fiasco stories, each more ridiculous than the last, and no treasure to show for it. As for Squawk, rumor had it he reappeared periodically, perched on the roof of the Rusty Mermaid hawking new treasure maps under the moonlight. Perhaps he still had a few leftover parchments to sell, or maybe he just enjoyed the spectacle of gullible pirates. One thing was certain, so long as there were crackers to be munched and buccaneers eager for easy riches, the parrot's cunning deals would go on causing hilarious mayhem wherever he flapped his colorful wings. And if one listened carefully during nights of merriment and mischief, they might hear his voice echoing in the distance. Treasure map for a cracker? Deal or no deal?